Today I'm speaking with David Hoerster. David, how are you doing?
Good, David. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know what? I'm really enjoying the Pittsburgh Code Camp, and I really appreciate you inviting me. Thanks.
Hey, not a problem.
Let's
Glad to hear you. Have you here.
Let's talk about jQuery.
Sure.
You're doing some interesting things with jQuery. Real quick, define what is jQuery.
jQuery essentially is it's a JavaScript-based framework for helping developers build the front-end UI web application.
Okay.
So most developers generally, when they hear JavaScript, they kind of cringe and scream, and for the most part, want nothing to do with it. But and I would say I was probably one of those developers at one point.
Well, why is that? First of all, why do people cringe?
JavaScript is a little. I think it's a little non-user friendly when you first look at it. I mean, there's very little typing in terms of the types of everything's a bar. The syntax is a little strange. Functions everywhere, and you're not really sure what's calling what. So I think people generally get a little defensive when they have to work with JavaScript. They're much more comfortable in an environment like C# or VB where everything's strongly typed. You actually compile code and you can actually debug through the code. So I think from a developer's perspective, C# or VB.NET are much easier to work with than JavaScript. But what jQuery really does is it kind of provides that layer between the developer and the JavaScript engine underneath that kind of abstracts some of the strangeness of JavaScript. It really presents to the developer a much more, I'm not going to say it's purely object-oriented, but when you work with jQuery, you're really working, it seems like you're working with objects. So if you're a C# developer or a VB.NET developer, working with jQuery is much more familiar, and sometimes you almost forget that you're working with JavaScript.
Okay.
So it really is just a layer of abstraction on top of JavaScript.
So when you work with JavaScript, you're always working with that abstraction of jQuery.
Yes.
Now tell me about some of the things you're doing with JavaScript.
Well, initially when I first started getting into jQuery and JavaScript, I probably did what most traditional developers deal with. Usually like some control validations, maybe a little bit in terms of asynchronous communication back to a service. But for the most part, it was like finding an element on a web page, maybe making it bold or something like that, playing around with styles, doing some validation based on regular expressions, and really just letting the rest of the application sort of live up on the server. Yeah. So that's kind of how I started kind of working with JavaScript.
It's evolved, though.
Yes. So as I've understood jQuery a bit more and really started to appreciate JavaScript, I started to realize that, there's a lot of work that can be done on the client that really should be done on the client. Whereas before, with the traditional ASP.NET application, we were doing it all on the server. So my, appreciation for jQuery and JavaScript has evolved such that I'm taking code that I used to put in the code behind up on the server and bringing it down to the client and really doing a lot of that traditional work within JavaScript and actually even some CSS. So it's really got me to really appreciate using JavaScript and CSS much more in conjunction with the traditional web application.
Okay, give me an example of some of those things.
I knew you were going to ask that next. So let's say, for example, I want to display a table on a web page. And maybe I want to be able to, let's say as I make a selection in a particular application, I want another table to kind of show the results of those selections.
Okay.
So for example, the Code Camp raffle application that I've built, so if you're at Code Camp, you'll see it around 4:45 today.
Okay, well I'll see it. None of my viewers will see it. Tape delay.
Yeah, I had to plug it. What we do is we associate a raffle item with a raffle prize winner, and so we have the table on the right-hand side that basically shows, hey, Dave won an Xbox, or whatever that might be. Well, in a traditional ASP.NET...
I won an Xbox?
No, wrong Dave, I did.
Oh, wrong.
So, yeah, not you, me. But in the traditional ASP.NET application, what I would do is every time I make that selection or that reference between the two items, I'd probably do a postback back to the server and then probably build table tags on the server code behind and have that stream back down to the client. So it'd actually have my table tags, my TR tags, my TD tags up on the server. And so I would do a lot of postbacking.
A lot of postback that's slow. You get that annoying flicker as the page refreshes.
Yeah, and really the most annoying part of it if you're an application architect is that you're sending a lot of data up, I'm getting a lot of the same data back down, and really the only thing I care about is probably a tiny fraction of that data coming back down.
Sure.
So from an architecture perspective, it's a horrible waste of bandwidth and bits going up and down, and especially if you're ever doing like Azure work or anything where you're paying on the the amount of bytes going up and bytes coming down, you'll get killed with your bills. So, over the years, with ASP.NET 2.0, when they introduced the Ajax control toolkit and that kind of stuff, you're able to target specific areas of your application to say, maybe with an update panel, I just want this particular table to update. So I would still post back to the server, so I'm still sending a bunch of data up, but really what's coming back down is just a tiny part of the page. So, but I'm still on the website, I'm still doing my table tags, my TR tags, my TD tags, and I'm still kind of building that table again. So I'm still doing a lot of work on the server, not as much work on the client, but I'm still sending a lot of data up and getting a lot of data back down that I really don't care about.
Okay.
So now that evolves to working with CSS and jQuery and even moving to WCF services on the server side. So now when I make that association between a raffle prize and a raffle prize winner, now what I'm sending up to the service is not a full postback, but maybe it's just a JavaScript column that I'm making through jQuery to say, hey, call this web service, pass these couple parameters up, and then what I'm getting back down is essentially just some basic, maybe a JSON object back that says, here's the user ID, here's the name, and maybe here's a picture or something like that.
Okay, JSON is JavaScript object notation.
Yes.
So it's an object.
It's an object coming back down.
Work with.
Right, and really it's a series of just name value pairs for the most part.
Okay.
So now my service call is not doing any HTML rendering at that point. So there's no table tags, TR tags, or TD tags. All that's coming back down is essentially a collection of name value pairs. And then I'll let jQuery on the client side take that result that came back down, and really at that point, you maybe create that TR, or the TR tag with the TD tags inside of it. So I'm really letting the client kind of render the data as it wants to. So what that ultimately allows me to do is I'm not tied to that service always having to work with a web application. Now I can take that web application, maybe have a Windows front end to it also, calling the same service, getting that data back down, and make it render it however it wants.
Oh yeah, so we talk about separation of concerns.
Exactly.
Is that in the old method where you're having the server build out these TR tags,
Yep.
the server has to know how to build a UI, has to know HTML.
Exactly.
The server really has no business knowing HTML.
Exactly. There's no reason it should.
The server exists for server things, business logic,
Right.
Updating databases, whatever, things that don't have to do with the UI.
Exactly. Yeah, so by adopting a JavaScript framework like jQuery, maybe doing some additional work with CSS, I'm kind of almost forcing myself to kind of get into that separation of concerns and really letting the browser do what the browser is best at, which is applying styles and really manipulating the DOM. The service, or the server, is not very good at manipulating the DOM because it doesn't know what the DOM looks like.
Right.
So by doing that, you're really letting the layer that has to deal with that particular thing deal with that particular thing.
Okay, and so jQuery facilitates that on the client side. What about on the server side? What exactly are you calling from jQuery to get that data back?
So what I'm generally doing is I'm creating WCF services on the server side.
Okay.
So I am becoming a big fan of the RESTful services and really using like webGet attributes on the server side to really allow my service to define exactly the type of operations that I want the service to expose. So if I'm trying to get information about, let's say, a raffle, I'll have a get method that can only be called using an HTTP get kind of call, and I just return JSON data back down. If I'm updating the service, or if I'm updating the database from the client side, I'm doing a post or an up or a put. If I'm deleting stuff, I'm making a delete column to the service.
Okay.
So I'm really using HTTP for what HTTP was originally built for.
Right. Yeah. Not a lot of people use put. They don't use put at all.
Right.
And for when they do, they get is kind of a. I've seen people use get
Right.
in order to send update commands.
Yes.
For example.
Yeah, and I will say I'm guilty of that too.
Those
so.
verbs really were designed for something else originally.
Yes. Yeah, and really when I started going down this road, pretty much, I probably went overboard and like everything was get or only the things that needed to have like a request body was a post. But now I'm really looking at those verbs much closer and kind of building up my services a lot more in line with what HTTP really should be used for. So.
All right. So I want to get
It's an evolving
involved in this more.
process.
Where am I going to learn how to do what you're doing? How did you learn?
How did I
Just
learn?
trial and error, or is there resources I can look at?
There is some trial and error involved, but definitely go to the jQuery site. So if you want to
jQuery.com?
jQuery.com. So if you want to learn more about jQuery, the documentation, they just released a new version, 1.4, back in February.
Uh-huh.
And so they actually revamped their documentation site, so it's a little bit more user-friendly, a little bit more readable. There's a lot of great information out there. They have some great examples. Pretty much every method that you can call through jQuery has examples along with it. So the documentation there is really how I taught myself a lot about jQuery. If I want to learn more about WCF services, great resources are Channel 9, Endpoint.tv, and the Arcast series. Those two sessions are great. There's always WCF talks scattered throughout those two different series on Channel 9. You can always check out different blogs. Like Scott Goo's blog, every now and then I'll have one about WCF. Ron Jacobs is a big WCF guy. He's actually more into workflow now, I believe, but he always has some good talk or good talks and also good blog posts. So there's a lot of good stuff out there. So is it MSDN or
what if I want to learn more about Dave Hoerster?
Dave Hoerster? I don't blog, so I
Okay.
need to start doing that. But you can follow me on Twitter if you want to do that. But,
What's that?
it's pgh.net. So I don't have my own Twitter account, but I Twitter for I tweet for the Pittsburgh.net user group,
Okay.
which I co-chair. So little shameless plug.
Well, great. Dave, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Hey, no problem, Dave. Thank you very much. Hey, so a lot of my friends can start following my blog that I hope to start, and it's going to be called Technology Fiber, Keeping You Regular.